What if the most powerful anti-inflammatory meals ever eaten were written about thousands of years before inflammation was a medical word? Right now, millions of people are spending hundreds of dollars a month on supplements, pills and powders, trying to quiet chronic pain, stiff joints, constant fatigue. Meanwhile, people in the ancient Near East were eating simple meals from the ground. And they didn't have those problems. Today, I'm showing you 10 of those meals. Straight from the biblical era, some named in scripture, that modern science has now confirmed are among the most anti-inflammatory foods on the planet. Here's what's going to surprise you. Every single one costs almost nothing. Pantry staples. Farmers market basics. Foods your grandmother would recognize. Stay with me, because number 7 is a grain eaten by laborers building ancient cities, and researchers now believe it reduces inflammatory markers more effectively than common over-the-counter pain medication. And number 4 is an oil that appears over 200 times in scripture. And what it does to your inflammatory pathways took scientists decades to understand. These aren't trends. They're not superfoods from a lab. They're what people ate when they had no other choice, and somehow they thrived. Let's get into it. Number 1, lentil stew, the meal that was worth a birthright. Let's start with a meal so significant that a man once traded his entire inheritance for a bowl of it. Genesis 25. Esau comes in from the field, exhausted, depleted, running on empty. Jacob is cooking red lentil stew. Esau says, "Feed me with that red stuff. I am exhausted." He sold his birthright for it. Most people read that and think Esau was foolish. Here's what they don't teach you in Sunday school. He may have known exactly what his body needed. Because lentils are one of the most complete anti-inflammatory foods in the ancient world, and modern science is only now catching up. 1 cup of cooked lentils delivers 18 grams of plant protein, 16 grams of fiber, and dense concentrations of folate, iron, and magnesium, the mineral now directly linked to regulating the body's inflammatory response. Studies in the journal Nutrients confirm that regular lentil consumption significantly reduces C-reactive protein, the primary blood marker your doctor uses to measure systemic inflammation. But it's not just the minerals. It's the fiber. Chronic inflammation doesn't only live in your joints. A significant portion originates in your gut. Lentils feed the beneficial bacteria in your gut lining, the same bacteria that regulate inflammatory signaling throughout your entire body. Healthy gut, lower inflammation. Damaged gut, inflammation spreads. Lentils were a staple across Egypt, Mesopotamia, Israel, and Persia. Not as a last resort, but because they kept laborers, farmers, and soldiers functional under intense physical stress. Anti-inflammatory medicine disguised as a peasant's dinner. How to make it? Simmer 1 cup of red lentils in 4 cups of water or vegetable broth. Add cumin, a pinch of turmeric, 2 cloves of garlic, and a drizzle of olive oil at the end. Salt to taste. Under $1 per serving. 25 minutes. This is the meal a man traded his future for. When you understand what's inside it, you start to understand why. Number 2, olive oil and bread. The sacred fat that heals from the inside. Before we get into science, you need to understand something. Olive oil is not a cooking ingredient in the biblical world. It is a currency, a medicine, a symbol of divine blessing so central to ancient life it appears in scripture over 200 times. Kings were anointed with it. Wounds were dressed with it. Lamps were lit with it. Every single day, ordinary people across Israel, Greece, Egypt, and the entire Mediterranean poured it over their bread and ate it. They didn't know why it kept them well. They just knew that it did. Here's what they were actually consuming. Extra virgin olive oil is 73% oleic acid, a monounsaturated fat that directly modulates inflammatory pathways in the human body. But the compound that makes olive oil truly extraordinary is called oleocanthal. Oleocanthal inhibits the same inflammatory enzymes, COX-1 and COX-2, that ibuprofen inhibits. Let that land. The same mechanism inside a common over-the-counter painkiller is happening inside extra virgin olive oil. Naturally. No side effects. No damage to your gut lining. Researchers at the Manel Chemical Senses Center found that 50 milliliters daily of high-quality olive oil produces an anti-inflammatory effect roughly equivalent to 10% of an adult ibuprofen dose. Same mechanism. And unlike ibuprofen, you can consume it every day for the rest of your life and it makes you healthier, not more dependent. The ancient world ate this with bread. Simple, dense, whole grain bread, and that matters because the fiber feeds the same gut bacteria lentils feed. Every meal in the biblical tradition was quietly, consistently building an anti-inflammatory foundation from food that cost almost nothing. How to make it? Take a thick slice of whole grain or sourdough bread, sourdough specifically, because fermentation reduces glycemic impact and adds beneficial bacteria. Pour a generous tablespoon of high-quality extra virgin olive oil over it. Add a pinch of sea salt and dried oregano. Oregano contains rosmarinic acid and carvacrol, compounds that amplify the olive oil's anti-inflammatory effect. That's it. Bread, oil, salt, herbs. It fed prophets, built civilizations, and anointed kings. And it was quietly reducing inflammation in everyone who ate it, thousands of years before that word existed in medicine. Under 50 cents per serving. Number 3. Garlic and herb broth, the plague medicine of the ancient world. Long before antibiotics. Long before anti-inflammatory pharmaceuticals. Long before any modern intervention we now take for granted, there was garlic. And every ancient civilization that encountered it came to the same conclusion independently. The Egyptians fed it to laborers building the pyramids. The Israelites mourned leaving it behind when they fled Egypt. It's listed by name in Numbers 11 as one of the foods they missed in the wilderness. Greek physicians prescribed it for infections, fatigue, and respiratory illness. Roman soldiers carried it into battle as food and field medicine. No culture that discovered garlic ignored it. Every single one made it central. Here's why. When you crush a raw garlic clove, an enzyme called alliinase converts alliin into allicin. Allicin is one of the most studied natural anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial compounds in nutritional science. Research in the Journal of Nutrition confirmed it directly suppresses pro-inflammatory cytokines, the same signaling molecules that drive chronic inflammation throughout the body. It also inhibits NF-κB, the protein complex that acts as the master switch for the entire inflammatory response at the cellular level. But here's what most people miss completely. The broth matters as much as the garlic. In the biblical world, broths were the primary delivery system for medicinal foods. Boiling herbs, roots, and aromatics in water wasn't just cooking, it was extraction. Hot water pulled bioactive compounds out of plants into a form the body absorbs rapidly through the gut lining. Modern pharmacologists use the exact same principle. They just call it a tincture and charge considerably more. A simple garlic and herb broth delivers allicin alongside quercetin from onion, thymol from thyme, and oleocanthal from olive oil. These compounds don't just work individually. Research on polyphenol synergy shows they amplify each other's anti-inflammatory effect when consumed together. How to make it? Simmer 4 crushed garlic cloves, half a chopped onion, and 3 sprigs of fresh thyme in 4 cups of water or vegetable broth for 20 minutes. Finish with a drizzle of extra virgin olive oil and a squeeze of lemon. Salt to taste. Drink it as a broth. Use it as a soup base. Pour it over the lentils from meal 1. Under 70 cents per serving. The pyramid builders drank a version of this. And they moved 2-ton stones for decades without modern medicine. That is not a coincidence. Number 4. Fig and honey porridge, the healing breakfast of kings and prophets. In 2 Kings 20, the prophet Isaiah is standing beside a dying king. Hezekiah. Severe infection. God himself has said his time has come. And Isaiah's prescription, before any prayer, before any miracle is declared, is a poultice of figs pressed against the wound. Figs, as medicine. In Scripture, modern microbiology has now confirmed what Isaiah apparently already knew. Research in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology identified that fig extract contains direct antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory compounds, including psoralen, bergaptan, and anthocyanins that suppress inflammatory cytokine production at the cellular level. A separate study in food chemistry confirmed dried figs contain some of the highest antioxidant activity of any commonly consumed fruit, higher than blueberries gram for gram. But figs don't work alone in the biblical kitchen. They work with honey. And honey is where this meal becomes extraordinary. Raw honey, not the processed syrup in grocery store bear-shaped bottles, but raw unfiltered honey the way the ancient world consumed it, contains glucose oxidase that produces continuous small amounts of hydrogen peroxide. It contains defensin-1, an antimicrobial peptide. It contains over 200 identified bioactive compounds including flavonoids and phenolic acids that directly inhibit inflammatory pathways. Proverbs 24 verse 13 says, "Eat honey, my son, for it is good." The promised land itself is described as flowing with milk and honey. This is not poetic decoration. In a world without refrigeration, without antibiotics, without anti-inflammatory medication, honey was one of the most reliable healing substances available. Wounds were dressed with it. Throats were soothed with it. Children were given it for fever. They were right about all of it. Now combine figs and honey with whole grain oats or cracked spelt, and you have a meal delivering beta-glucan fiber, which clinical research consistently shows reduces LDL cholesterol and systemic inflammatory markers, alongside the polyphenol of fig and the bioactive compounds of raw honey, all before sunrise, all for under $1. How to make it? Cook half a cup of whole grain oats or spelt in 1½ cups of water until thick. Stir in 2 chopped dried figs and a drizzle of raw honey at the end. Never cook the honey. Heat destroys its active enzymes. Add a pinch of cinnamon, which contains cinnamaldehyde, shown to reduce inflammatory markers in multiple clinical trials. Figs, honey, ancient grain, cinnamon, under 90 cents per serving. A king was healed with a fig poultice. A nation was promised a land flowing with honey. Every morning you eat this, you are consuming the same anti-inflammatory logic the ancient world built its medicine on. Number 5, roasted lamb and bitter herbs, the Passover plate that was designed to heal. There is a meal in the biblical world that was not just food. It was a commandment. Exodus 12. The night before the Israelites leave Egypt, God gives Moses specific, detailed instructions about what to eat. Lamb, unleavened bread, bitter herbs, not suggested, not recommended, required. Every household, every year, for generations. Most people read the Passover meal as purely spiritual, a commemoration, a symbol, and it is all of those things. But look at what is actually on that plate through the lens of nutritional science. Something remarkable comes into focus. Every single component is anti-inflammatory. Every single one. Start with the lamb. Pasture-raised lamb, the only kind that existed in the ancient world, contains one of the highest concentrations of conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, of any animal protein. CLA is a naturally occurring fatty acid that directly inhibits inflammatory pathways, specifically the arachidonic acid cascade driving joint, gut, and cardiovascular inflammation. A study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found CLA supplementation significantly reduced tumor necrosis factor alpha, one of the primary drivers of chronic systemic inflammation. But they weren't supplementing. They were just eating lamb the way lamb was always eaten. On a fire, simply seasoned, fat intact. Now the bitter herbs. The bitter herbs of Passover. Endive, chicory, horseradish, wild lettuce, were not chosen arbitrarily. Bitter plants share one biochemical trait. They are dense in polyphenol. The same compounds that make them sharp and unpleasant to the modern palate signal the liver to produce bile, stimulate digestive enzymes, reduce gut inflammation, and activate detoxification pathways. Horseradish contains sinigrin, a glucosinolate shown in phytotherapy research to inhibit the same COX-2 enzyme we discussed with olive oil in meal 2. Chicory contains inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria and reduces intestinal inflammation at the lining level. Then the unleavened bread, nothing but grain and water. No yeast, no additives, no processing, pure whole grain in its simplest form. The fiber feeds the gut. The absence of additives means nothing on this plate is triggering an additional inflammatory response. The Passover plate was not assembled by accident. Whether you read it as divine instruction or accumulated nutritional wisdom, the result is identical. Pasture-raised protein rich in anti-inflammatory fats. Bitter herbs that heal the gut and liver. Simple whole grain bread, eaten together, every year, as a feast of remembrance and restoration. How to make it. Roast lamb shoulder or chops seasoned with sea salt, garlic, and rosemary at 375 degrees for 45 minutes. Serve alongside a bitter herb salad, endive or chicory dressed with lemon and olive oil. Add whole grain flatbread on the side. Under $3 per serving. A civilization ate this meal every year for thousands of years and called it sacred. Modern science is now mapping exactly why their bodies responded the way they did. The prescription was written long before the science existed to explain it. Number 6. Turmeric and cumin-spiced chickpeas. The spice market medicine of the ancient world. There is a moment in Ezekiel where God gives the prophet a precise recipe. Ezekiel 4 verse 9. Wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and spelt, combined into a single bread. Nutritional researchers who have analyzed that recipe note it produces one of the most complete amino acid and fiber profiles of any single food combination in the ancient world. The biblical kitchen was not cooking by accident. It was cooking by accumulated wisdom. And nowhere is that wisdom more concentrated than in the spices. Today's meal is built around chickpeas, one of the oldest cultivated legumes on earth, documented in ancient Israel, Egypt, and Mesopotamia as far back as 7,500 years ago. But the chickpeas are the canvas. The real medicine is what gets rubbed into them. Turmeric first. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, is the most studied natural anti-inflammatory compound in the history of nutritional science. Over 3,000 peer-reviewed studies. Research in the journal Oncogene found curcumin outperformed aspirin and ibuprofen in inhibiting NF-κB, the same master inflammatory switch we discussed with garlic in meal 3. But here is the critical detail most people consuming turmeric are missing entirely. Curcumin has poor bioavailability on its own. Your gut absorbs only a fraction before it passes through. However, black pepper contains piperine, a compound that increases curcumin absorption by up to 2,000%. 2,000. Not a typo. And traditional spice blends across the ancient Near East, India, and North Africa combined turmeric and black pepper instinctively, millennia before bioavailability was a concept anyone had language for. They combined them because people who ate it felt better. The mechanism was invisible to them. The result was not. Now add cumin, referenced in Isaiah 28 where farmers carefully harvest it. Cumin contains thymoquinone, shown in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology to reduce inflammatory cytokine production and protect the liver from oxidative stress. It also dramatically improves digestive enzyme activity, meaning the nutrients in the chickpeas are absorbed more completely when cumin is present. The spice is not just flavoring. It is a bioavailability enhancer, a digestive activator, a compound that makes the entire meal work better. Combine this with chickpeas, 15 grams of plant protein per cup, 13 grams of fiber, significant magnesium, folate, and iron, and you have a meal addressing inflammation at multiple levels simultaneously. Fiber heals the gut. Protein supports tissue repair. Curcumin suppresses the inflammatory cascade. Piperine ensures absorption. Cumin activates digestion so nothing goes to waste. How to make it? Drain and rinse 1 can of chickpeas. Toss with 1 teaspoon turmeric, 1 teaspoon cumin, a generous pinch of black pepper, sea salt, and 2 tablespoons extra virgin olive oil. Roast at 400 degrees for 25 minutes until golden and crisp. Finish with a squeeze of lemon and fresh parsley. Under 80 cents per serving. The spice merchants of the ancient world traveled thousands of miles to trade these compounds. Wars were fought over them. Trade routes were built around them. And every cook who reached for turmeric and cumin together was participating in a tradition of healing that predates every pharmaceutical company on earth by several thousand years. Number 7. Barley porridge with olive oil, the grain that built armies and healed bodies. This is the one I teased in the hook. And I want you to understand the full weight of what we're talking about. Barley was not a secondary grain in the biblical world. It was the grain of the common people, the laborer, the soldier, the farmer. When the angel visits Gideon in Judges 7, a dream about a barley loaf tumbling into a Midianite camp is interpreted as a sign of military victory. In John 6, it is barley loaves, not wheat, not rice, that feed 5,000 people on a hillside. Barley was everywhere, cheap, filling, and quietly doing something to the bodies of everyone who ate it that researchers are only now fully measuring. Here is what modern science has found. Barley contains the highest concentration of beta-glucan fiber of any grain on Earth. Beta-glucan dissolves in the gut and forms a thick gel that does several things simultaneously. It slows glucose absorption, preventing the blood sugar spikes that trigger inflammatory cascades. It feeds lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, the beneficial gut bacteria whose decline is now directly linked to increased systemic inflammation. And it binds LDL cholesterol in the digestive tract before it can be absorbed. The FDA has approved a specific health claim for barley, one of only a handful of foods to receive this designation, confirming its beta-glucan content demonstrably reduces cardiovascular disease risk. That is not a supplement company's marketing claim. That is a regulatory body confirming what ancient armies already knew by observation. But the anti-inflammatory story goes deeper than fiber. Barley contains Hord-9, a natural alkaloid shown in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry to inhibit inflammatory signaling in immune cells. It also contains tocols, a family of vitamin E compounds that neutralize free radicals generated by physical exertion, heat stress, and chronic low-grade inflammation. Roman gladiators consumed barley as their primary grain. They were literally called hordearii, barley men. Not because it was all they could afford, because their trainers observed over generations that barley-fed athletes recovered faster, endured longer, and built denser muscle than those on other grains. They were watching beta-glucan and tocols at work. They just had no names for what they were seeing. Now combine barley with olive oil, which inhibits the same enzymes as ibuprofen, and you have a breakfast that simultaneously reduces blood sugar inflammation, feeds beneficial gut bacteria, neutralizes oxidative stress, and delivers a natural COX-2 inhibitor. 1 bowl. Before you leave the house. How to make it. Simmer half a cup of pearl barley in 2 cups of water or vegetable broth for 25 to 30 minutes until tender and creamy. Drizzle generously with extra virgin olive oil. Add sea salt, cracked black pepper, and fresh thyme or parsley. For sweetness, add a few chopped dried figs from meal 4. Under 60 cents per serving. The gladiators called themselves barley men and meant it as a title of strength. The armies of ancient Israel marched on it. 5,000 were fed with it on a hillside by the sea. The most underestimated grain in the modern kitchen. Healing inflammation since before inflammation had a name. Number 8. Pomegranate and wild honey dressing over greens. The royal fruit of restoration. There are fruits mentioned in Scripture that carry weight beyond their nutrition. The pomegranate is one of them. It appears in Exodus on the hem of the high priest's robe, embroidered in blue, purple, and scarlet. It appears in Song of Solomon as a symbol of abundance and vitality. It is one of the 7 species of the Promised Land listed in Deuteronomy 8: wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey. The the specific foods God tells the Israelites they will find in the land of abundance. 7 foods. Not chosen randomly. Chosen because in the ancient Near East, these were the foods that sustained life, restored strength, and kept bodies functioning under relentless physical and environmental stress. The pomegranate was the royal fruit. And modern biochemistry is now revealing exactly why every culture that encountered it treated it with reverence. A single pomegranate contains over 600 individual aryls, each packed with punicalagins and punicic acid. Compounds so unique they are named after the fruit itself. Punica granatum. Punicalagins are polyphenols so potent that pomegranate juice has been shown in multiple clinical trials to contain 3 times the antioxidant activity of red wine and green tea. But antioxidant activity is only part of the story. Research in advanced biomedical research found that pomegranate extract directly inhibits interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, 2 primary inflammatory cytokines responsible for the chronic low-grade inflammation underlying arthritis, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, and accelerated cellular aging. A separate study in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry demonstrated pomegranate consumption reduced inflammatory markers in type 2 diabetes patients more effectively than standard dietary intervention alone. The ancient world didn't have inflammatory cytokine panels, but they had eyes. What they observed was that people who ate pomegranates regularly were more vital, more resilient, and recovered more effectively from illness and physical exertion. That observation was encoded into religious ritual, architectural decoration, and agricultural priority across every major civilization of the ancient Near East simultaneously.